Hello and welcome to the Armenian News Network Groong Weekend Review for October 20, 2024. Before we get going, our usual thanks go to our listeners because we really appreciate all your comments on our YouTube videos. So keep expressing your thoughts, like our videos, and share them with those who you think are interested in our topics. We're always interested in reaching a wider audience.
And also, we're recording this on Monday, October 21, and 398 days have passed since the disastrous war of September 2023, which culminated in the ethnic cleansing of Artsakh. Dozens of Armenians, including the military political leadership of Artsakh, remain in Azerbaijani captivity, and their suffering continues to be met with widespread indifference by global governments, which unfortunately includes the regime in Yerevan as well.
Hovik, thanks for reminding us of this issue. Our hostages and prisoners have suffered a loss of their lifetime that is simply unconscionable and also unjustified. What's more, you usually talk about this at the end of our shows, but let me take this up right here as well. This COP29 ECHO conference coming up in Baku, which many European leaders are planning to attend. Many of us have been active in exhorting these leaders to not attend until Baku releases all Armenian POWs, like it agreed to do in writing in November of 2020. And also, it stops killing journalists and opposition members and jailing its minority leaders, and so on and so forth. I've called attendance of COP29 by any leaders a cop-out 29 on their obligations to humanity, human rights, and free speech.
Indeed.
Anyway, today we're talking with Sergei Melkonian. Hello, Sergei. Welcome to the show.
Baravzes, it's a pleasure always to be with you.
Thank you for coming.
Okay, let's begin with the 3+3 forum that was held in Istanbul. Essentially, after Moscow and Tehran, this year, it was Istanbul's turn to hold the third meeting of the so-called 3+3 platform, which took place last week. During the summit, Mirzoyan met with Bayramov as part of the current bilateral format of meetings. We're not aware of any results, at least none were reported, but the big three, Russia, Turkey, and Iran, proposed to Armenia and Azerbaijan to move their so-called peace process negotiations to the 3+3 format in order to achieve what they term as a regional solution. At this time, neither Armenia nor Azerbaijan have responded to the offer. We're not sure what else was discussed, but it seems that the Armenia-Azerbaijan process seems to have been the most dominant topic for this year's summit. So what are the prospects for Armenia and Azerbaijan agreeing to move the negotiations under the auspices of 3+3? Would such a move be advantageous or disadvantageous for Armenia?
Thank you for your question. It's a really important issue, Armenia-Azerbaijan peace process today. Let's start with the goal of 3+3 format. So the main idea is first to, let's call it, de-westernize the South Caucasus. From Russia's and Iran's perspective, it's much better to have South Caucasus without any Western presence. This is why they're trying to implement the Astana model for Syria, where Russia, Iran, and Turkey were engaged in order to reach a ceasefire regime to settle zones of the escalation, etc. And the main idea was to handle all issues as much as possible without any Western engagement. The same they're trying to do here in the South Caucasus. Second, the implementation on the ground, of this de-westernization process, is the unblocking of communications. As far as we know, several months ago, Armenia and Azerbaijan were discussing the option of engagement international private military company, as most possibly should be a kind of Western organization. We didn't hear any really negative statements from Turkey, from Iran, but we get hard statements from Russia, from Lavrov while Putin's two-day trip to Baku. Now they're trying to not monopolize, but to have a dominant position on unblocking communications agenda. The problem is it's impossible to unblock the communications until there is no peace deal between Armenia and Azerbaijan. From diplomatic perspective, Armenia was trying to untouch these two tracks, engaging bilaterally and separately with Turkey and separately with Azerbaijan. But the problem is, we know that that's not possible because Turkey's position towards Armenia is coming from Baku. So until Armenia did not fill all Aliyev's demands, Turkey is not ready to do anything. Yes, we had a meeting at the level of ministers of communications and infrastructure between Armenia and Turkey. And as we see what the process is going on, Armenia is trying to do all homework, to have all homework done until reach agreement with Turkey, and then with Azerbaijan, and then come to Turkey and show that, okay, I've reached an agreement with Azerbaijan, and we've done all preliminary work related to communications. So we have technical details, we have agreed on custom control, we have agreed on security control, etc., etc. So now, the next day after Armenia-Azerbaijan peace deal, to have an opportunity to open the Armenia-Turkish border. And this is one of the main diplomatic goals of current Armenian foreign policy as we see. And from this perspective, Armenia, Russia, and Iran, they are not against any sovereign, let's call it sovereign control from Armenia. So, okay, if Armenia is not ready to implement Article 9, November 2020 statement, Iran and Russia are totally fine if there will be only Armenian control. Custom control, border control, and security control. And they are trying to bring all different perspectives and options on the 3+2 table to avoid any Western engagement. And recently, just today, we had a meeting at quite high level between Mr. Aliyev and U.S. Special Representative Special Advisor to the President of the U.S. on European Eurasian affairs. Then he had a meeting with Bayramov, Foreign Affairs of Azerbaijan. And yes, they also were discussing Armenia-Azerbaijan peace deal. And now there is a competition between, let's call it, Western and non-Western mediation. Who will be the key peace broker? Because from the Western perspective, it's extremely important to have this corridor from Turkey via Armenia, via Azerbaijan to Central Asia, and avoid any Russian engagement. And that was stated officially from the US. But the problem is, Nikol Pashinyan last week stated that we are discussing Russian engagement on the communications only as observers. So there is a shift in Armenian position. And in order to secure the non-Russian configuration in the South Caucasus, US is trying to be more active in this way.
So one of my questions, we know that, as you said, the US is trying hard to also mediate, but from a mediator's perspective, how would mediation under the auspices of the US change things? Essentially, what power does a mediator have in these discussions? And essentially, why are they trying so hard? Are they able to really, as a mediator, change the shape of the agreement?
Yeah. From Western perspective, it's also important to unblock Armenia-Turkish border. In case of total win of Georgian Dream during elections in the end of this week, that will be complicated to reach Armenia via Georgia. So that will be, if the West is still interested in having East-West communication, it means that the West needs Armenia more than today. So from this perspective, they need to make some pressure on Azerbaijan in order to give any paper, I'm not talking about peace deal, to give any paper that Mr. Aliyev is completely satisfied, and that might be a ground for Armenia-Turkish normalization. And yes, these activities are connected with the elections in Georgia, with COP29 November in Baku, and elections in the US. So it's important from their perspective to not lose this momentum. But the question is what they are ready to put on the table. If you are a peace broker, you should be ready to provide something to both sides, like it was during Abraham Accords.
Right.
United Arab Emirates got their part from the US, Israel got its part from the US. The same is during Saudi Arabia-Israel normalization. And one of the parts of this deal should be a security agreement between US and Saudi Arabia. So what US is ready to put on the table, that's not clear.
Were there any other major topics on the 3+3 agenda this year that we missed?
Not serious. From my perspective, that might be interesting if Armenia continues its negotiations on unblocking communications in the region within 3+2. I will explain why. Because Armenian positions may be stronger in terms of avoiding Article 9, in terms of avoiding any format of so-called Zangezur corridor, because we have a diplomatic platform with direct Iranian engagement. Before that, Iran, the only way for Iran to mitigate the negative impact of unblocking communication was to make pressure on Azerbaijan, to pressure somehow Russia side, to deal with Turkey, and that's it. So that was only bilateral trade. But if you have 3+2 format, when you have not only Armenian voice or only Iranian voice, you have two voices, and then you have more opportunities for playing.
But let me ask another question on this topic and we'll move on. I was listening to a lecture by John Mearsheimer recently, and he believes that the best chances of survival for a superpower is to have regional hegemony, and each region can only have one hegemon, essentially. At least that, according to him, is the best way for a superpower to increase its chances of survival. Meanwhile, we see our region, essentially, there seems to be a competition between Russia, Iran, and Turkey. Or is it possible for Russia, Iran, and Turkey to agree on a status quo, like freezing the status quo, what exists today? Or will this be an unstable status quo that will flare up again over the coming decades because of this unnatural state where none of the regional superpowers is the hegemon?
That's an interesting question. Before answering, we should define the region that we are talking about is the South Caucasus. So
South
is it the
Caucasus,
part,
exactly.
is it is it the part of post-Soviet space, or it's a part of Middle East, or it's part of European periphery? Let's call this way. Because from Azerbaijani experts' perspective, this is not post-Soviet space anymore. So we're talking about post-Soviet space. From European perspective, this is the periphery of European Eastern neighborhood. We have Georgia that is interested to continue somehow to be engaged with EU. There is Armenia who is interested in integration with EU, and this is partly Middle East. If we have Iran and Turkey as a key players in the region, so this is Middle East. I mean, before answering this question, we should understand the identity of the South Caucasus. But yes, partly I agree that if we shift from unipolar to some polar wall, it means that there should be some centers of powers. And yes, here we have three centers of powers, Russia, Turkey, and Iran. And as I see, both Turkey and Iran, they maybe not agree and maybe not accept, but they understand that Russian positions here in the region are stronger than positions of Iran and Turkey. But at the same time, for example, today I read the statements of Iranian and from Iranian member of parliament who stated that yes, we do not discuss any border change, but historically all these lands they belong to Iran. Armenia, Georgia, Azerbaijan, Dagestan, Ossetia, etc., etc. And because of two agreements, we do not have control over this territory. I mean, from all these three countries' perspective, yes, they project their power, this is their zone of interest, etc. But both Iran and Turkey, they first of all trying to follow the Russian activity. Because when you talk with Iranian experts, for them it's important to understand what Russia is going to do, not Turkey, for example. So they are more reactive in this case, not proactive.
Let's move on to Artsakh and Moscow's perspective on it. This past week, Maria Zakharova, spokeswoman of the Russian MFA, stated that there was and still is an open opportunity for Artsakh's Armenians to repatriate to their homes. Personally, I just can't believe I'm reading this, but she also went on to praise Azerbaijan's, quote, constructive approach, unquote, to allow Armenians to move back to their homes. Needless to say, absolutely nobody expects Armenians of Artsakh to move their families back into the killing fields and risk yet another genocide. Not the Russians, I believe, not the Azeris, not the Armenians, nor the Artsakhis, nor anyone in the West. So this begs the question, what is the politics behind this claim by Zakharova?
As I understand their perspective is, first of all, I completely disagree with such statements because I see them as a continuation of pro-Azerbaijani perspective, like Azerbaijan is ready to provide all conditions for a safe staying for Armenians, and that's completely impossible to have so until there is a leaves regime, total Armenophobic or leaves regime. And coming to why Russia is stating so, not only because Zakharov is trying to play for Azerbaijani side, there are two reasons. Reason number one, if this agenda works, Russia may be engaged in any processes more in the region. Maybe Russia should be engaged somehow in providing security guarantees to Artsakhis, to Armenians from Artsakh to move there, etc. And then we clearly understand that this issue will bring on the agenda the so-called Western Azerbaijan agenda. Because Aliyev and Azerbaijan, they are trying to use this tool simultaneously when someone is trying to use the issue of Nagorno-Karabakh, the Armenians from Nagorno-Karabakh. And the second, the problem, as I see, is in Armenians' position. So what Armenian position is on this issue? Do we agree that Aliyev and Azerbaijan armed forces, they've conducting ethnic cleansing last year? We had the statements from Alain Simonian, who stated that Aliyev had a legal base to attack Nagorno-Karabakh in September 2020 because there were some UN resolutions, etc. It means that from this perspective, Armenia recognized Nagorno-Karabakh as a part of Azerbaijan, and Azerbaijan has all legal basis to do whatever it wants on its territory. So does it mean that Armenia is ready to justify the ethnic cleansing that took place in September last year? In case of Armenia does not have clear position on it, I mean, should Armenians go back to Artsakh and live there under any security guarantees? Who will provide the security guarantees? Or it's not possible to move Armenians back until all territory is under Azerbaijani control, because Azerbaijan has conducted ethnic cleansing and Azerbaijani policy towards Armenians and Armenia in general is not changing, etc. So until the Armenian position is not clear, there is a big room for different manipulations.
What about the position of the Artsakh Armenians? Would they actually move back if there were Russian security guarantees? I mean, there's been already that experience, which is negative. Or would they require, let's say, international guarantees, whatever that means?
I'm convinced that most of us, so we do not have any surveys to answer this question properly, but from my bubble, I mean, from discussions with Armenians from Artsakh Republic, from different spheres, from government, education, military, etc. I mean, 100% of them are not ready to go back, even with the Russian security guarantees, because they clearly understand that until Armenia is not backing Artsakh, no one is going to back Artsakh. They need strong Armenia that is ready to struggle for their rights. Only after that they are ready to be engaged somehow with the Russian tools that may provide any kind of security guarantees, etc. But Artsakh, civil society, some organizations, they've demanded Armenian MFA, that was today or yesterday, on taking into account their rights when they are discussing something with their foreign partners.
So really, the true security guarantee for Artsakh Armenians has been Armenia rather than anybody else, which also tells me that as long as this current government is in place, there's no real hope for Artsakh Armenians to repatriate en masse.
No, this issue is not on the agenda at all. So if the strategic goal is to reach any kind of peace with Azerbaijan, even on the base of unilateral concessions, then to open border with Turkey, to be integrated in Turkey-backed East-West transport communication. So the issue of Republic of Artsakh is not even secondary. It's out of the agenda at all.
The only thing I can say is that when I talk to my friends and contacts from Artsakh, I think the most they could hope for, unfortunately, at this point in time, is the ability to move, not even visitation of graves, but the ability to move the graves of their loved ones to Armenia, unfortunately. And given the geopolitical circumstances, I'm not sure when this will change, but I second Sergei's comment in that we should have the dream. I mean, not just a dream, but we should work hard towards eventual return of Artsakh Armenians. But I don't see how anyone, not a single person that I know, who would agree to move back if they have to become a citizen of Azerbaijan and if they have to serve in the army that killed their brothers, their sisters, their parents, their sons. So, I mean, people listening to this podcast who are not from Armenia should realize that peace is not as, a done deal as possible, because this will be an undignified peace for Armenians and especially for Artsakh Armenians.
One more thing then, Sergei. So what is all this topic about? Is it just a red herring? Is it a carrot to the Armenian leadership to come to the table for something? Is it a blame shifting tactic? Because, both Azerbaijan and Russia have a heavy hand in the ethnic cleansing, and this is a human rights issue. So they're trying to shift the blame over to the Armenian side, saying, hey, look, there was an opportunity to return, but you opted not to return. So it's not ethnic cleansing anymore.
You mean Zakharova's or Simonian's statement?
No, I'm specifically talking about the Russian statements, yes.
Yeah, so the Russian position during close discussions is following. First, hey guys, you did not care about Artsakh after 2020. So why you think that we should defend Artsakh more than you? Second, Aliyev became stronger because not only because you allowed and you became weaker, but because of the clear change, because of Ukraine war. So yes, during close discussions, they agreed that the balance a little bit changed in Russia-Azerbaijan relations. So two reasons. First of all, you did not back Artsakh, you didn't support it, etc. The second, yes, the situation has changed since the February 2022, and we were not able anymore to be an exclusive security provider, and now we should find some options.
Well, okay, before we finish off the topic, I really do want to argue this issue a little bit more, because regardless of Armenian government's mistakes and faults of not backing Artsakh, Russia had made a promise to protect the population of Artsakh. There was absolutely no reason for them to just basically allow the entire thing to devolve into an ethnic cleansing. They should have actually protected their security in their own homes and basically said, don't touch the population. But Azeris were actually attacking, killed hundreds of people. So that was a huge failure on their part, which I am not ready to absolve them of that responsibility.
Obviously, and that was humiliation for Russians.
Absolutely.
When Azerbaijan kills Russian peacekeepers, including deputy commander of their peacekeepers. When we had a meetings here in Yerevan, it's recorded, you can find it on YouTube, where clearly Russian experts stated before ethnic cleansing that Russia in Nagorno-Karabakh will not allow ethnic cleansing.
That's right.
So the scenario of Sepsky Krajina is not relevant for this region. This is the red line for us. So, and everything has changed since February 2022, since the Ukraine war.
Yeah, and just to be clear, I'm absolutely not absolving the Armenian government of its responsibilities and faults either.
Sergei, you earlier mentioned in the context of the 3+3 format, you mentioned elections in Georgia as having a potential effect on the region. We know that Georgia did not participate this time.
Mm-hmm.
There are various explanations for it, but I wanted to ask, given that the results from the elections in Moldova seem to be coming in, I wanted to discuss the importance of the elections in Moldova and Georgia to the potential for the future of the region. Specifically on the Moldovan elections, I can say that the referendum to join the EU, apparently on the last minute, the yes vote, there was a huge surge in the yes vote. And right now, it's 50% plus a very small margin for the yes vote. Meanwhile, the elections for leader of Moldova are currently, I believe, facing a runoff. Mm-hmm. But it's important to notice, it's important to add that Moldovans in Russia, and there are a significant number of Moldovans in Russia, were not able to vote. The Moldovans in Transnistria, most of them, it appears, were not able to vote in these elections. But Moldovans everywhere else, living in the West, were able to vote. And it seems like there was these results don't seem to be free and fair, at least from my perspective. So, what can you tell us about the Moldovan elections? What can you predict for the elections in Georgia, and how, under what scenarios, will the region's geopolitics, the current trajectory shift or change?
First of all, I'm convinced that this is not that result that the ruling elite in Moldova wanted to have within this referendum. Second, that might have some kind of domino effect, as we have the same, not the same, but close to the same topic elections in Georgia. Are you ready to be more with the West or less with the West and more with Russia? And then we have the EU referendum on the agenda here in Armenia. As you know, all 50,000 signatures, this step is completed. They passed to the parliament, and now they're waiting for the decision of the parliament. Are they ready to put it on the agenda, or these pro-Western political parties will have to collect 300,000 signatures to have a referendum on joining Armenia to EU? And yes, in Moldova, they try to use all possible tools, as you mentioned. I will add that, for example, some leading opposition channels in Telegram, they were blocked, and the opposition was, less effective in their propaganda. And I'm not sure that will strongly affect Georgian elections, because we see that the ruling party will win. So the issue is, will they have the constitutional majority in the parliament or not? Even in the West, when we discuss with our colleagues, they are convinced that the ruling party in Georgia will win. So they're discussing, will they have to make combinations to have a coalition with someone, or they will have a constitutional majority? And I'm not sure that Armenia will strategically change its foreign policy, but yes, there might be some shifts. For example, we see Nikol Pashinyan is going to attend BRICS, and Armenia is still continuing to be engaged within CIS. Armenia has appointed ambassador that is very close to ruling elite in Armenia, and ambassador that was like in the top of anti-Russian sentiments.
Gurgen Arsenyan.
Gurgen Arsenyan, yes. And they are trying to, at least to not lose connection with Russians. But yes, for Armenia, that's really important case. If Moldova is not going to be fully pro-Western, if pro-Western, let's call pro-Western Georgian perspective is stopped, Armenia will be more accurate and more delicate with its steps towards EU or towards US, and at the same time will try to increase its level of relations with Russia. We see that it's in practical level.
Yeah, we're all looking forward to the results in the Georgian elections, but everyone we've talked to predict that if the Georgian dream does win the elections, as currently the polls seem to indicate, that there may be major unrest there. So important to watch.
And I guess possible shifts in the strategy of the West towards Armenia, because Armenia will become less accessible for them without a Turkish border.
Yeah, less accessible, but more important in the South Caucasus.
Yeah,
important in the context of undermining Russia's
as a geopolitical tool. Yeah, we'll talk about that more in coming weeks, I hope. So, moving on to our next topic, Sergei. The presidents of Iran and Russia met in Turkmenistan about 10 days ago. It appears that it was scheduled as a quick touch base ahead of the BRICS summit in Kazan, where it is anticipated that a new strategic partnership between the two countries may be signed. Putin said our assessment of current events in the world are very close between the two countries. So this is happening in the backdrop of a major potential regional escalation. We know that currently Iran is bracing for a lethal and surprising attack promised by Israel. And depending on how big the attack is, there are predictions of a major regional war looming, which makes the dynamics of the Russia-Iran relation even more interesting for us. On the ground in the Caucasus, it seems that Russia and Iran have publicly disagreed, at least on one aspect, which is the communication between Azerbaijan and Nakhichevan via Armenia. This is this infamous point 9 of the November 9-10 agreement, which we have discussed ad nauseum at this point. So can you tell us what areas do Russia and Iran agree on, and more importantly, they disagree on?
First of all, both for Iran, for Russia, and also for the US, is important to stop the escalation in the Middle East. I mean, in expanding the escalation in the Middle East, and each side has its own reason. For the US is, I mean, clear, US is not interested to be engaged in a large-scale war for Israel against Iran, while US is close to elections and China's threat is rising, etc., etc.
Right. And Israel is doing everything to draw the United States into
Yeah,
a war.
Netanyahu is doing everything to bring US more in this mess. And this is why, for example, some part of, as we understand, part of US elite has leaked the plan of Israeli attack.
Yeah.
Just demonstrating that not all US is standing for Israel and ready to start a large-scale war against Iran. Because, I mean, it's obvious that Israel unilaterally alone is not able to destroy Iranian military, nuclear infrastructure, and decision-making centers. I mean, only with the support of US Air Force, this goal might be achieved. Why Iran is not interested, that's also clear. Iran was creating this axis of resistance in the Middle East in order to not be engaged directly in the conflict, but to have its allies, its satellites, to be a shield and to deter US, Israel in the region. And Russia, from one perspective, Russia is interested in at least having a low-level escalation because all Western attention is shifting from Ukraine to Israel, etc. But from the other side, for Russia is extremely important to avoid the expanding this escalation because Russia was investing a lot to reach a fragile peace in Syria. But we see that this instability may involve Syrian, at least southern territories. And Russia was working hard to have that was called southern zone of the escalation within Astana format. When they dealt with armed opposition, they destroyed some terrorist units there, and they established a relative peace. Because let me remind you that all Syrian war has started from the south, from Dara. From protests from the southern part. And now it's extremely important to not allow Israel to collapse the situation in Syria again. And so from this perspective, I mean, each side is interested to keep the situation under control. And coming to Russia-Iran deal, for Iran, it's, I mean, obvious that the only way for Israel to make Iran weaker, more aggressive, to push Iran for more emotional steps is massive attack on military infrastructure, factories, and maybe some decision-making centers. And from this perspective, for Iran, it's extremely important to get from Russia two things. First, Su-35 aircrafts, and second, S-300 or S-400 air defense systems.
And this is what they're talking about, I think, currently, right?
Yeah, obviously, they're talking about this. And this is the most important part of Russia-Iran strategic agreement that they are discussing during maybe last year. And they are preparing to sign this strategic partnership agreement during BRICS summit in Kazan.
So just a quick question, because you answered a bunch of this. Israel dealt significant blows to Hamas and Hezbollah leaderships. And some say that those organizations have been significantly weakened. And this is basically Israel daring Iran to not work through proxies and engage directly in the Middle East. Do you believe that Iran has specific red lines in the Middle East? And you said that it doesn't want direct confrontation, but at what point could it suddenly get drawn into a larger scale, I'm not going to say war, but maybe conflict in the Middle East with Israel?
Option number one, Iran is still insisting on its strategic patience. So we are not ready and we are not preparing to attack first, but we always will answer. So it means that they might be engaged in case of large-scale attack against Iran. And option number two, in case of threat of total destroying of Hamas, Hezbollah, and other pro-Iranian organizations. As you mentioned, you are right, they are weakened, but they are not destroyed. Let me remind the Israeli official goals in Gaza: destroy Hamas, military infrastructure, ideology, leadership, everything. And option number two, bring back hostages. So Israel did not achieve these both two goals.
Let me add another option, which is secure the north part of Israel for its citizens who have fled, essentially. Northern, as far as I understand, northern Israel is uninhabitable right now for most Israelis.
Coming to Hezbollah, they even did not officially state their goal. Their goal might be, you are right, to bring Israelis back home in northern part. And the goal number two, for example, kick Hezbollah out of Litani River, based on UN Security Council resolution that no armed forces should be there. But they even didn't state officially that this is their goal. They just crossed the border with Lebanon and they're conducting military operation, as they call it.
Sergei, Azerbaijan provides Israel with 40% of its oil. And despite the ongoing war in the Middle East, Israel continues to heavily arm Azerbaijan. This is ongoing even right now. This is a symbiotic relationship between two rapidly aggressive states. What expectations of Azerbaijan does Israel have should this conflict with Iran flare up into a direct war?
I mean, they have points of intersections of interest in the South Caucasus. And one of these points is the so-called Zangezur corridor. If Israel is interested to act not directly against Iran, they can weaken Iran via Zangezur corridor, as they, for example, did in 2020 war. Israel was number one country that directly supported Azerbaijan by military equipment supply.
Right.
Turkey was, according to my calculations, was on the second place with this military munition. And the second part might be the so-called Zangezur corridor. And yes, I mean, from Israel's perspective, according to their new so-called periphery doctrine, Azerbaijan is playing a crucial role, as this is the only country that is bordering with Iran, where Israel has its presence very close. Yes, they have presence in Iraq, but comparing with Azerbaijan, Azerbaijan is a very high-level tool for Israel to gather intelligence information. For example, we've recorded here in Armenian earthquake 2 weeks ago. So, and for Israel, presence in Azerbaijan will facilitate the gathering the intelligence information. Was it a really nuclear bomb test in Iran, or it was just earthquake? Then Israel will be able to conduct its intelligence operations to collect information in Iran, then try to escape through Azerbaijan. And the highest level, how moving forward, how Azerbaijan might be important for Israel is providing its space for its air forces. I mean, for drones, for aircraft, etc. But it means Azerbaijan will instrumentalize itself, and Azerbaijan will be on Iran's target. So this scenario is only possible in case of, I don't know, really large scale war.
So do you think the vehemence with which Azerbaijan has been demanding a Zangezur corridor at least partially has something to do with Israel's demands to obtain this land for its own reconnaissance or intelligence operations? Because Israel doesn't have a whole lot of...
Israel is using the temporary occupied southern part of Artsakh Republic to gather the intelligence against Iran. But no, I mean, from Israel's perspective, that's obvious that the Zangezur corridor will make Iran weaker.
Mm-hmm.
So it means that in case of need, they will continue to pump up Azerbaijan. So as Israel officially states, we are engaged directly in 7 fronts. So we have war in 7 fronts, but at the same time, we see how Israel is actively continuing to send weapon and military munition to Azerbaijan. There is a really problem in Israel Defense Forces with military munition for their own. I mean, without US support, that was impossible to conduct such operations. Only within 1 year, US spent $22 billion for Israel support, and 18 billion they were allocated for military stuff. And IAI and other Israeli companies, they continue to produce military equipment, and they're sending to Azerbaijan while they need this military equipment. And we have some statements from Israeli officers that they're trying to use less active artillery and other stuff because they have problems. But at the same time, we see that they continue to pump up Azerbaijan. So it means that from their perspective, they are acting against Iran by making Azerbaijan stronger. That will balance somehow Iran, that will make Iran more sensitive, and Iran will need to allocate some part of its forces close to Azerbaijan, even the air defense systems, etc., etc. So, I mean, this is a part of this combination, as I say.
Somehow, I don't think that Azerbaijan is stupid enough to really antagonize Iran
Yeah, that's obvious.
or Israel, but we'll see how this thing pans out.
This week, the 16th annual BRICS summit is due to take place in Kazan, Russia. In fact, it starts tomorrow, Tuesday, October 22nd. There are some new membership applications, among them Azerbaijan's. Armenia will attend as an observer, as you mentioned. Pashinyan and Putin are expected to meet on the sidelines of the summit again. BRICS is not a military alliance. It's more of a loosely coupled grouping of countries that are, let's say, concerned about economic hegemony of the West, the dollar, and the weaponization of sanctions, etc. Would you agree with that assessment, my assessment of BRICS? And what are the key agenda items on this summit's radar?
Yes, I will agree, but it depends on country. For example, for everyone, it's clear that the world is changing and everyone is looking for its place under the sun. But for some countries, such as, for example, Azerbaijan, what does mean attending BRICS? If we come back a bit to international relations theory, we see that Azerbaijan is trying to shift from a small state to middle power. And it means that you are going to play with more serious guys. So from Azerbaijan perspective, Baku has solved some not really complicated issue related to some internal affairs. Now they are challenging France with neo-colonialism. Now they're engaging in global issues, climate security, etc., and climate change and climate security. Now they're attending to BRICS to show that I'm playing at the level with Iran, Russia, China, India, Turkey, etc. So I'm not a small state from post-Soviet space anymore. I'm new serious player in the new world configuration. So this is Azerbaijani perspective. For some other countries, this is an opportunity to be engaged in not new formats dialogue, meetings, etc. It's not important, but to have a new deals. This is a platform where you can make deals related to oil, gas, money transfer, etc. Where you have China, where you have India, you have Russia, you have Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia is discussing, etc., etc. So it means that you have a lot of things to get from there. And this is why BRICS is attractive for other countries that are not the part of, as Richard Sacco was writing, political West. And yes, if they are benefiting from the political West, at the same time, they can benefit from the BRICS, from non-West. Even we have, moreover, when we have statements from the EU, that European Union is not against in Turkey's engagement going deeper with BRICS. So that was a green light, not only for Turkey, but for some other countries, because maybe someone in Turkey was afraid of relations with the BRICS somehow may freeze or stop Turkish Euro integration process. But no, we see that Brussels has green lighted it and Turkey is okay. So it means that for all other countries, it's also okay. And coming to the last part of the question, Hovik, it's not completely clear what will be on the agenda. I mean, obviously, they will discuss a new world order, the importance to not struggle, but to deter somehow unilateral sanctions. For Russia, is extremely important to have a consensus that countries in the world, they should not allow one country or group of countries to use unilateral tools to punish other countries. I mean, unilateral sanctions from the US, etc. So this is the key Russian agenda. From their perspective, they need to create a new consensus around their agenda. This is why, for example, one of statements from in the end of CIS summit, and Armenia did not join this statement. there were two statements, and one of these was related to sanctioned regime, and they didn't specify the US, the West, etc. That was blurred, but that was clear that they are talking about the West. I think for Russia that will be agenda number one in this summit.
How about Turkey? Turkey has, I think, voiced its intentions to join, but I'm not sure if its membership is on the docket for this summit. Is Turkey hedging its bets, and has it applied officially for membership, or is essentially it's posturing right now?
The problem is, yes, Turkey stated that we officially will apply for membership, but at the same time, we heard from Russia that at least for this year, the membership process and enlargement, let's call it enlargement process, is closed. Maybe they will discuss Turkish membership next year. All countries will try to play this political game. Okay, we're ready to get you in BRICS, but what we will get, let's discuss, etc. But yes, there is a political decision in Turkey, as we see, that they will join BRICS. Maybe in case of any good agenda from the West, Turkey may postpone, freeze, or change its decision on joining BRICS. For example, if they engaged in new F-16, for example, program, etc. And yes, Turkey will change its BRICS membership to more tangible stuff in order to have more hard power, that because Turkey understands that only hard power design the future balance in the world. So not BRICS membership, but for example, new military stuff from the US.
So Sergei, for small countries like Armenia, Georgia, should they consider joining BRICS? What would be the advantages or disadvantages?
It depends on foreign policy strategy. If Armenia is interested in, for example, making some coalitions with non-West, okay, yes, Armenia should be involved in some BRICS, maybe not become member, but at least be more active with BRICS, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, etc. If Armenia is interested to make coalitions to achieve its foreign policy goals with the West, it means no, Armenia should avoid any formats with with engagement of Russia, China, Iran, etc. So it depends on Armenian foreign policy goals.
Should we be worried about Azerbaijan joining BRICS?
Unfortunately, yes, because Azerbaijan is playing for both sides. They are a good partner for the West. And from this perspective, Ursula von der Leyen was really honest when she stated that Azerbaijan is a reliable partner.
Yeah.
And the same we may hear for example, from Russia. The same I hear, for example, from Israel, is that, hey guys, Azerbaijan is a reliable partner. We get money, we send weapons. Azerbaijan never use credit lines, etc., etc. This is a really good partner. But the problem is that Azerbaijan is making not alliances, but trying to find consensus around agenda that are based on its national interests. For example, with the case of ethnic cleansing last year, for Azerbaijan was obvious, and I wrote that in article before the ethnic cleansing, that Russia will not start war against Azerbaijan in case of Azerbaijani attack.
Mm-hmm.
And Azerbaijan, there was several meetings at the level of general staff, ministers of defense between Azerbaijan and Iran. And Azerbaijan stated that I'm not going to touch Armenian borders. I will limit my aggression only within Nagorno-Karabakh. And when Azerbaijan got a signal that Armenia will not deter somehow Azerbaijan. So that was international consensus. When Armenia at the Western platform agreed that Nagorno-Karabakh is a part of Azerbaijan. So it means consensus around one agenda. So all players are okay if Azerbaijan conduct ethnic cleansing. All players are okay. Armenia, West, Russia, Iran, etc. So the same they're trying to do with the so-called Zangezur corridor. This is why it's complicated to find an interest on the crossroads of peace. But you may find countries that are interested in the so-called Zangezur corridor. You will see that, oh yeah, some countries are interested in having so-called Western Azerbaijan, etc., etc., etc.
So Azerbaijan, you're saying that Azerbaijan may use BRICS as a consensus building platform for its national interests, including, for example, the Zangezur corridor and other things. It'll just go there to make the case for why that should happen, and that would be against Armenia. Okay. Thank you, Sergey. Let's leave it there for today. Let's get to our personal thoughts and statements. Hovik, maybe I can start with you today.
Yes, again, we should remember our hostages in Azerbaijan. Every single minute, every single second they spend there is torture, and it is a shame for Armenians, and it is besmirching our dignity. So I hope, our listeners, if you're Armenian, you should live every second of your life with that in mind. It doesn't take too much, unfortunately, Fortunately, it doesn't take too much for you to express your thoughts. Follow the hashtag COP29 on Twitter, on social media, and express your comments there. And essentially live by the motto that, what will you tell those prisoners, those hostages, when they come back to Armenia? What did you do to get them back sooner? And the second thing that we didn't cover, but this week was in the news. Previously, Pashinyan and his cronies, including his wife Anna Hakobyan, have blamed the war, the loss of the war in Artsakh in 2020 on the traitors, within the ranks of the military, including supposedly 11,000 traitors and deserters. Meanwhile, last week, the head of the Armenian National Security Service, Armen Abazian, said that there are only 26 cases that have been sent to the courts. And I have followed some of these cases. Most of these cases are soldiers who think that they're chatting with some, hot chick, I don't know, online. And the things that they have provided could hardly be considered, in my opinion, serious intelligence, let alone the cause for the loss of the war. And that begs my question, who really is the traitor here? If they do blame this war on 11,000 deserters, where are the criminal cases? Just another sham, just another, I would say, cloak to cover their own treachery, their own treason, in my opinion.
Sergey, your thoughts?
Thank you, Hovik Jan. I completely agree on our hostages and everything that, unfortunately, we're continuing to face this, and that it's complicated to find the right word, humiliation that is continuing to take place, unfortunately, today. And the only call is we should continue to follow our national agenda, as Azerbaijan is, for example, doing. For example, today in Azerbaijani parliament was created an initiative group on so-called Western Azerbaijan. I mean, what does it mean for us? Even if the Artsakh issue is out of Armenian agenda, it does not mean that Aliyev's regime will not push forward the so-called Western Azerbaijan agenda. Even if you do not care about national interests, I mean, about Artsakh, about diaspora, about Armenian Church, etc., and you care only about state interests, I mean, the interest of Republic of Armenia. Therefore, to counter-argue Azerbaijani continuing expansionist rhetoric and agenda, you should put on the agenda the Artsakh Republic, the right for return, etc. I mean, even based only on pragmatic perspective, and because, I mean, after 2023, many people, they became so pragmatic. Let's forget this one. But the problem is our so-called neighbors, they do not forget anything. So, and my only call is to have a long memory.
Thank you, Sergey. May I add to that the right of return of Armenians who were forced out of Baku and Sumgait with pogroms, Armenians from Shahumyan and other places as well. And let's not forget about those things also. If there's any horse trading Azerbaijan wants to do, they're going to have to find something else then, ask for a bargain for the historical and extraordinary case of Artsakh's ethnic cleansing. This is a form of genocide. There's no price for that, and there's no trading for the rights of Artsakh Armenians. In fact, that is not even the Armenian government's possession to negotiate or trade away. All right. Well, on that note, we'll leave it there for today. Thank you so much for joining us, Sergey.
Thank you, Sergey John.
Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure.
That was our Week in Review show recorded on October 21, 2024. We've been talking with Dr. Sergei Melkonian, who is an academic director at the Armenian Research Foundation. He served as assistant to President of Armenia, Armen Sarkisyan, on Russia and Middle East politics. Sergei is currently a research fellow at APRI Armenia and the Institute of Oriental Studies, and he's also an assistant professor at the Yerevan State University and the Russian Armenian University. He is a co-founder of the Armenian Project NGO. For more on everyone in this show, please go to the show notes at podcast.groong.org/episode number. Please remember to support us. Go to our donate page, podcasts.groong.org/donate, and become a sustaining member of Groong and give monthly. Thank you in advance. I'm Asbet Bedrosian.
And this is Hovik Manucharyan.
Please follow us on social media and follow us everywhere you get your Armenian news. The links are in the show notes. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you soon.